Hi there, future educator. Welcome to your study guide refresher for the Illinois Licensure Testing System, ILTS, Field 055, English Language Proficiency. This video covers Subarea I, Reading Comprehension, which accounts for all 55 multiple-choice questions on the exam. Let's jump right in. Before we begin, we created a free study guide workbook that pairs with this video. It includes key vocabulary lists, reading strategy breakdowns, practice questions with full answer explanations, and space for your own notes. Grab your free copy from the link in the description at teacherpreps.com/free/ILTS 055 Study Guide. This video is brought to you by TeacherPreps.com. Our full exam prep platform features complete study guides for every objective, full-length timed practice tests that mirror the real exam format, vocabulary exercises, and AI-scored constructed response practice for the writing and oral proficiency tasks. It's free to get started. Just head to TeacherPreps.com. All right, that was our plug. For the rest of this video, it's go time. Grab your pen and paper. Let's start with the exam format. The ILTS 055 English Language Proficiency Test has 3 parts. Subarea I is reading comprehension with 55 passage-based multiple-choice questions. Subarea II is a writing proficiency constructed response where you write a composition on an assigned topic. And Subarea III is an oral proficiency constructed response where you record spoken responses to prompts. The total testing time is 3 hours and 45 minutes. Subarea I, the reading section, is the largest single component. Every question is tied to a reading passage, so your ability to analyze written text quickly and accurately is the key to earning those points. The exam is organized into 3 subareas and 5 objectives total. Subarea I, Reading Comprehension, covers objectives 1 through 3. Objective 1 is literal meaning, identifying explicitly stated information. Objective 2 is inference and interpretation, reading between the lines. Objective 3 is critical analysis, evaluating how a text is constructed and how reliable it is. Subarea 2, Writing Proficiency, covers Objective 4. And Subarea 3, Oral Proficiency, covers Objective 5. In this video, we are doing a deep dive into Subarea I, which contains all 55 multiple-choice questions and represents roughly half of your total exam score. Let's begin with Objective 1, Literal Meaning. Literal meaning questions ask you to identify information that is directly stated in the passage. There is no guessing, no reading between the lines here. The answer is explicitly present in the text. This objective covers 3 core skills. First, identifying main ideas and supporting details. Second, recognizing the sequence of events or steps in a process. And third, determining the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in context. Let's take each one in detail. The first skill under literal meaning is identifying the main idea and supporting details. The main idea is the central point the author wants you to take away from a passage or paragraph. It answers the question, what is this passage mostly about? Supporting details are the specific facts, examples, statistics, or descriptions that back up the main idea. Think of the main idea as the roof of a house and the supporting details as the walls and foundation that hold it up. On the exam, you will see passages from a variety of genres: informational articles, narratives, persuasive essays, and technical writing. For each one, the first thing you should do is identify the topic sentence or thesis statement. In well-structured prose, the main idea often appears in the first or last sentence of a paragraph. But be careful. Some passages place the main idea in the middle or imply it across several sentences without stating it in one neat line. A common trap is confusing a supporting detail with the main idea. For example, if a passage discusses the benefits of bilingual education and mentions a specific study showing improved test scores, that study is a supporting detail. The main idea is the broader claim about bilingual education being beneficial. When you see a question asking for the main idea, look for the answer choice that captures the overall point, not just one specific fact from the passage. The second skill is recognizing sequence. Sequence questions ask you to identify the order of events, steps in a process, or stages in a development. Signal words are your best friend here. Look for terms like first, then, next, after that, Finally, before, during, and following. These transition words tell you exactly how events are organized in time. In narrative passages, sequence questions might ask what happened before a character made a decision, or what occurred as a result of a particular event. In informational passages, sequence questions often focus on procedures or chronological developments. For example, a passage about how a law was enacted might describe the drafting phase, committee review, floor debate, and final vote. One test-taking strategy is to number the events in the margin as you read. When a sequence question appears, you can quickly verify the order without rereading the entire passage. This saves valuable time on exam day. The third skill under literal meaning is vocabulary and context. These questions give you a word or phrase from the passage and ask what it means as it is used in that specific sentence. The key phrase is as used in the passage because many words have multiple meanings, and the exam is testing whether you can determine the intended meaning from surrounding context clues. Context clues come in several forms. Definition clues directly define the word in the same sentence or the sentence immediately following. Synonym clues restate the idea using a similar word nearby. Contrast clues use words like however, unlike, or instead to show the opposite meaning, which lets you infer the word's definition by its contrast. And example clues list instances that illustrate the meaning. For instance, if a passage says the curriculum included ancillary materials such as workbooks, flashcards, and online quizzes, the examples tell you that ancillary means supplementary or supporting. On the exam, never pick the most common dictionary definition automatically. Always substitute each answer choice back into the original sentence and see which one fits the context best. This simple substitution check eliminates wrong answers quickly and reliably. Now let's move to Objective 2, Inference and Interpretation. Where Objective 1 asked you to find what the author said directly, Objective 2 asks you to figure out what the author meant, implied, or suggested without saying it outright. This is the analytical heart of the reading section. Objective 2 tests 3 core skills. First, drawing logical conclusions from textual evidence. Second, identifying cause and effect relationships. And third, determining the author's purpose, perspective, or intended audience. Drawing conclusions means combining information from the passage with your own reasoning to arrive at a statement that the passage supports even though it is not explicitly stated. Think of it as reading between the lines. The author provides clues, specific word choices, examples, and descriptions, and you connect those clues to reach a logical conclusion. For example, if a passage describes a teacher who arrives early, stays late, volunteers for committees, and mentors new colleagues, you can reasonably conclude that the teacher is highly dedicated, even if the passage never uses the word dedicated. On the exam, strong inference answers are always grounded in evidence from the passage. If an answer choice requires information from outside the text or makes a leap that the passage does not support, eliminate it. The correct answer will be the one that follows logically from what the author actually wrote. A useful strategy is to ask yourself, based on the passage, which statement must be true? If you can point to specific sentences that support the inference, it is likely correct. If you cannot, move on to a better option. Cause and effect questions test whether you can identify why something happened and what resulted from it. The cause is the reason or trigger, and the effect is the outcome or consequence. Signal words for cause include because, since, due to, as a result of, and caused by. Signal words for effect include therefore, consequently, as a result, led to, and so that. Some passages present a chain of causes and effects, where one event triggers another, which triggers a third. For instance, a passage might explain that increased immigration led to overcrowded schools, which led to a demand for bilingual educators, which prompted state legislatures to fund language training programs. When you see a cause and effect question, map the chain in your mind or on scratch paper. The exam may ask about the initial cause, the final effect, or a link in the middle of the chain, so you need to see the full picture. Author purpose questions ask why the author wrote the passage. There are 4 main purposes you should recognize. To inform means the author presents facts, data, and explanations without trying to change the reader's mind. Informational passages are neutral in tone. To persuade means the author is trying to convince the reader to agree with a position or take an action. Persuasive passages use opinion language, emotional appeals, and logical arguments. To entertain means the author uses narrative techniques, humor, or vivid description to engage the reader's interest. And to describe means the author paints a detailed picture of a place, person, event, or concept using sensory language and specific details. On the exam, author purpose is closely tied to perspective and intended audience. If a passage argues that standardized testing is harmful and uses charged language like damaging, counterproductive, and stifling, the purpose is persuasion, the perspective is critical of testing, and the intended audience is likely educators or policymakers who can influence testing practices. Always look at word choice and tone to determine purpose. Neutral, factual language signals an informative purpose. Emotional, value-laden language signals persuasion. Let's move to Objective 3, Critical Analysis. This is the highest level reading skill tested on the ILTS 055. Critical analysis questions require you to step back from the content of the passage and evaluate how it was built, how effectively it communicates, and how trustworthy it is. Objective 3 covers 3 main areas. First, analyzing tone, mood, and stylistic elements. Second, evaluating text structure and organizational patterns. And third, assessing the credibility and reliability of sources and arguments. Tone is the author's attitude toward the subject. Mood is the emotional feeling the passage creates in the reader. They are related but distinct. For tone, ask yourself, how does the author feel about this topic? Common tones include objective, which is neutral and fact-based. Optimistic, which is hopeful and positive. Critical, which is questioning or disapproving. Sarcastic, which uses irony to mock or criticize. And nostalgic, which looks back warmly at the past. To identify tone, focus on the author's word choices or diction. An author who describes a policy as a bold initiative has a different tone than one who calls it a reckless experiment. The content is similar, but the attitude is opposite. Mood is about the reader's experience. A passage describing a quiet village at sunrise with golden light and birdsong creates a peaceful, serene mood. A passage describing a crowded emergency room with shouting and flickering lights creates a tense, urgent mood. On the exam, tone and mood questions often present 4 answer choices with subtle differences. Read carefully. The difference between skeptical and hostile, or between enthusiastic and neutral, will determine the correct answer. Stylistic elements also fall under this objective. Look for figurative language like similes, metaphors, personification, and hyperbole. Understand how the author uses imagery and sensory details to strengthen the passage's effect. Text structure refers to how the author organizes information within the passage. Recognizing the structure helps you predict where key information will appear and understand how ideas relate to each other. The 5 most common organizational patterns are chronological order, where events or steps are arranged by time sequence. Compare and contrast, where the author examines similarities and differences between 2 or more subjects. Signal words include similarly, on the other hand, whereas, and in contrast. Cause and effect, where the author explains why something happened and what resulted. Problem and solution, where the author presents a challenge and then proposes one or more responses to it. And description, where the author provides detailed characteristics of a topic without a particular logical sequence. On the exam, a question might ask you to identify the organizational pattern of a passage. To answer correctly, look at the transition words and the overall flow of information. If the passage moves from a difficulty to a proposed fix, the pattern is problem-solution. If it lays out 2 viewpoints side by side, the pattern is compare-contrast. Understanding structure also helps with main idea questions because the organizational pattern often reveals the author's primary purpose. The final skill under critical analysis is evaluating source credibility and argument strength. Credibility depends on several factors. First, is the source an expert in the relevant field? A published researcher writing about language acquisition is more credible on that topic than a celebrity blogger. Second, is the information current? A study from 2024 is more relevant than one from 1985, especially in a rapidly evolving field like education. Third, does the source show bias? If an article about a reading program was written by the company that sells the program, the potential for bias is high. For argument evaluation, the exam tests whether you can distinguish between fact and opinion. A fact is verifiable. You can look it up and confirm it with objective data. An opinion is a judgment or belief that cannot be proven definitively. Strong arguments use credible evidence, logical reasoning, and address counterarguments. Weak arguments rely on emotional appeals without evidence, make sweeping generalizations, or commit logical fallacies like ad hominem attacks or false analogies. When evaluating an argument in a passage, ask, does the author provide sufficient evidence? Is the reasoning logical? Are there gaps or contradictions? These questions will guide you to the correct answer. Let's walk through a sample passage-based question together. Imagine a passage that describes how a school district adopted a new English language learner program. The passage states that test scores improved by 15% in the first year, then explains that the program was developed by a private company and partially funded by that same company. The passage includes quotes from teachers praising the program, but does not include any independent research. The question asks, which statement best describes a limitation of the evidence presented in this passage? A. The passage fails to mention the cost of the program. B. The passage does not include data from other school districts. C. The passage relies on a source with a potential conflict of interest and lacks independent verification. D. The passage uses too many statistics. Take a moment to think about your answer. The correct answer is C. The passage relies on a source with a potential conflict of interest and lacks independent verification. Here's why. The company that developed the program also funded it, which creates a financial incentive to report positive results. The passage includes teacher testimonials, but no independent research, meaning the evidence has not been verified by a neutral third party. Option A is a valid concern, but it does not address the credibility issue, which is what the question specifically asks about. Option B would strengthen the evidence, but is not the primary limitation. Option D is incorrect because having statistics is generally a strength, not a weakness. This question tested critical analysis, specifically your ability to evaluate source credibility and identify bias. Exactly the skills from Objective 3. Nice work covering Subarea I of the ILTS 055. That's all 55 multiple-choice questions and roughly half of your total exam score. But there are still two big sections ahead. Subarea II, Writing Proficiency, requires you to write a well-organized composition demonstrating grammar, mechanics, and clear expression. Subarea III, Oral Proficiency, tests your spoken English through recorded responses to prompts. Together, those two constructed response subareas make up the other half of your score, so you want to be fully prepared across all three sections. The complete study guide covering all 5 objectives, plus full-length time practice tests and AI-scored constructed response practice, is available right now at TeacherPreps.com. Link is in the description.